Maul was a Zabrak male born on Dathomir 54 years before the Battle of Yavin, though some sources also say he was Iridonian. Maul was the youngest of 3 brothers, but never knew this himself as he was taken by Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis as an infant. His early years were marked by pain as he was brutally trained by the pair as a Sith assassin. During his final mission as an apprentice, Maul was sent to deal with the Naboo trade crisis. Here he dueled and killed Master Qui-Gon Jinn, but by a stroke of bad luck, he was cut down by Jinn's apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi. For the next decade, he roamed the world of lawful minor, slowly losing his mind and moving forward solely on his own hatred. Eventually, he was revived by Savage Opress and Mother Talzin during the waning years of the Clone Wars. He and his brother successfully took over the top crime syndicates in the galaxy and conquered the planet of Mandalore, and ravaged the galaxy in search of vengeance. These actions brought the attention of Darth Sidious, who quickly nullified the threat and used them to hunt down and kill Mother Talzin. Maul then lost Mandalore in the Republic's siege, and remained hidden in the shadows for another 16 years. When he learned Obi-Wan had survived the Great Jedi Purge, he tracked the Jedi Master down for a final showdown. Here, he was finally struck down for good, departing Kenobi as more of an old friend than anything else. For the sake of keeping things straight, I will exclusively refer to this one as Darth Maul, this one as Lord Maul, this one as Old Maul, and when I'm talking about the character in general, I will just say Maul. The question I pose to you today: which version of the Zabrak Warrior would win in a battle royale to the death?
Wait a minute, what about Old Wounds Maul? That one was pretty cool. Or Resurrection Maul, or, Maul Killer.
That's a great question, Voice of Nick, representing my perception of the audience. But please, this is complicated enough with 3 of them. I couldn't possibly run a 6-way gauntlet. Unless, of course, I happen to get a lot of requests from the audience to discuss it. But I think we stalled enough. Let's get started. Maul was half human, half Zabrak. His Zabrak side gave him ample strength and dexterity, and his human side supplied him with willpower and ingenuity. From the time he was born, the Sith taught him to resist pain by way of brutal torture. Darth Sidious regularly hung him upside down for hours, submerged him in freezing water, and left him alone with assassin drones prepared to terminate him. Another time when he was young, Sidious left him stranded on Mustafar with no resources, and the child survived 2 weeks by himself before getting picked up by his master. He was also capable of moving faster than even a droid could perceive long before he hit his prime. Darth Maul was just off his teen years and getting into adulthood. His greatest strength in a fistfight was his strength, as well as his durability, to the point that he could shrug off Force lightning from a Night Sister witch. When Sidious sent him undercover in a prison, he brought down an armed Yuzhong warrior with his bare hands. Later on during this run, he killed a steroid-pumped Wampa by tearing its ribcage open, crushing its heart, and this was right after bashing its skull in to the point of its face caving in on itself. That's straight up Mortal Kombat fatality right there. Lord Maul was roughly 30, give or take, and in excellent condition considering how his life had gone. The main difference you may see here is that his lower half is completely cybernetic. We aren't certain what those legs are made of, but considering that they're Mandalorian design from Clone Wars era, I would wager some kind of Durasteel alloy. Having these legs increased Maul's height and allowed him to absorb more damage in his lower half for the sake of acrobatic jumps and leaps, as well as advanced kicking power. That's not stated anywhere, that's just science. He was fast enough to match blows with Darth Sidious, strong enough to contend with General Grievous, and tough enough to survive being trapped in a junkyard for years and years while only losing his brain cells. Old Maul is around his early 50s, just at the tail end of his physical prime. For the most part, it seems as though he's playing the old man trick that Yoda employs. He pretends to be more decrepit and frail than he actually is to get his opponents to underestimate him until it's time to shine. But the main thing to remember is that this is a trick. In his battle with the three Inquisitors, he was able to outpace them all with superior strength and agility. He landed several good hits on the 5th and 8th brothers, taking them out of the fight very early. Then later he was able to strike Kanan across the eyes faster than either Kanan or Ahsoka could react. He also survived a trek in the Tatooine desert for several days with no resources, showing at least part of that resilience from his youth is still with him. A physical bout between the three will inevitably fall between Darth Maul and Lord Maul. No offense to Old Maul, he's proven more than capable of contending with his two opponents. He simply doesn't have the same feats of power as his predecessors. Lord Maul is maybe a bit faster, but he has nothing to match the roided Wampa thing. I don't want to make the comparisons of their showings against Force Lightning because they were clearly up against two very different levels of power. But in the end, I think the younger, hungrier Darth goes up against the Lord's more developed body and cybernetics. No edge given except for the one that they hold against their older counterpart.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Originally, Darth Sidious was meant to take Mother Talzin as his apprentice, but much to his surprise, Baby Maul's potential in the Force surpassed hers to a ridiculous degree, so the Dark Lord took him instead. Or some random Night Sister just dumped him on Plagueis' doorstep, depending on your sources. Darth Maul was an assassin first and foremost, meaning many of his tools were set up around subtlety and secrecy. Of course, he had the basics of any Force wielder, such as Force strangulation and the classic mind trick. But he was also capable with Force cloak to a point where he could watch the Jedi Temple itself, and none of the Jedi inside even felt a disturbance from his presence. Occasionally, he'd even just mess around with a Jedi and let it drop for an instant, just to watch their unease. In combat, the Force was used to amplify all his other abilities and focus in on manipulating the environment and his enemies. It is said that during his first showdown with Jin and Kenobi, Darth Maul clouded their minds through the Force and kept them from predicting his movements. The Zabrak wasn't particularly advanced in his own telepathic endeavors, but his own resistance to it was so good that when an opponent tried to probe him, the fellow went comatose just from the strain. His precision and skill were his greatest allies, but he wasn't just limited to these. He could send numerous heavy objects and creatures flying with a wave of his hand, and managed to break the Force wall of a young Obi-Wan Kenobi at one point. This all shows that he was much more capable of applying a more forward approach if he deemed it necessary. More than a decade in hell with nothing but the Force to sustain himself gave Lord Maul a need to use its power more frequently and straightforward. During his time on Lotho Minor, he assembled for himself a spider body of sorts to make himself look more powerful and intimidating to the monsters on world. This pile of scrap was held together only by his sheer willpower. After his mind was mostly put back together by Talzin, Maul used the Force less like a tool and more like a blunt instrument, but still an incredibly powerful blunt instrument. With the help of his brother, he pulled down a ship that hung over a cliffside to stop Kenobi from catching up to him. This was after he broke through the Force shield of Kenobi and sent him flying through the cavern. Most impressive, however, was his performance during the Siege of Mandalore. He was able to redirect blaster bolts like a waterbender controls the waves, and during this time, he became the only person in the entire galaxy to foresee Anakin's role in the Jedi Purge and the destruction of the Republic. His telepathy has also improved, looking deep into the mind of a clone trooper to learn information about Ahsoka and her connection to young Skywalker. Later, during Order 66, Maul is given a rush of the dark side. According to Dave Filoni, the death of so many Jedi in this time gives all Darksiders an insane boost in power, and with his strength on his side, he was able to pull down a ship's core with his bare hands and bring the entire thing down from orbit. Wait, am I reading that right? That's actually true? You guys know what that means, right? That definitely leaves a possibility open that this rush of the dark side is still amping the Sith during the end of Episode 3. That means that Sidious and Vader may have been on this same amp when they battled Yoda and Obi-Wan. That seriously changes the context of those fights, and the fact that they were still so even means that we've all been undervaluing both of the Jedi for years. The fact that Obi-Wan might have been going equal in Force strength with a boosted Anakin, and Sidious could still barely match Yoda's strength in the Force even with a power boost, implies that both Jedi are potentially even stronger than their Sith counterparts on a good day, and if the fights had been under different circumstances... Sorry, this ain't about them. Back to Maul. In his time hiding in the shadows, Old Maul has had to play up his other powers. He's worked the telepathy to the point where he can casually probe a person's mind without the struggle and torture tidbits. I don't know about you, but that at least puts him above Kylo Ren in power for me, though that isn't extremely hard. But he's also spent the years since we've seen him tapping into his heritage of Sith sorcery and magic. He's created Force illusions that fooled Ezra into believing he was on the base multiple times, and even plant the visions in his head of Tatooine and Kenobi. This is after Ezra's training under the Sith holocron, and Ezra himself at this point is capable of dominating unwilling subjects with the dark side, so that's no small feat. He's also got a vast knowledge of ancient rituals, such as the trick with the holocron fusion giving him any information he seeks, but he's no slouch on the battlefield either. After toying with the Inquisitors for a while, he casually broke the Force wall of the Seventh Sister and held her in suspended air for Ezra to strike down. When the pair were in the Sith Temple, Old Maul was more than capable of wandering through and holding up the pillars of the doors with ease, while Ezra struggled to carry even one. That does at least put him on a similar playing field with the Lords of the Ancient Sith Empire, so that's nice. The big question we have to answer here though, did he read the mind of Obi-Wan Kenobi? My answer is no. If Old Maul really knew what was on Kenobi's mind, he would have taunted him with much more than vague guesses. I firmly believe that in this moment, he's simply using his basic knowledge of Kenobi's character and principles. I'd imagine the mindset here is, Kenobi's hiding out in the middle of nowhere instead of helping people in the galaxy, or even trying to rectify his past mistakes. Who does he think he is, Luke Skywalker? Let's break a few things down. Everyone here has a competent enough Force wall around their minds, so telepathy is basically useless in a straight fight. Lord Maul will not have the Great Jedi Purge fueling him, so don't get any ideas about him ragdolling the other two or bringing a building down in this contest. But honestly, even without it, he still has the most combative applications with his Force abilities. Darth Maul's environmental manipulation and Old Maul's tricks might keep them in the fight, but in a straight contest, Lord Maul still has better showings and more frequently at that. I give him the edge in Force abilities. Maul's combat style is rooted in Juyo, Ataru, and Teräs Käsi. Juyo was the most deadly of the 7 lightsaber forms, and banned from the Jedi Order for bringing its users so close to the dark side. It relied on one's ability to feed on the aggression of oneself and one's enemies to utilize an aggressive onslaught of attacks. Ataru was in a similar vein, but used acrobatics to dance around an opponent. It also utilized punches and kicks to back up the swordsmanship. Teräs Käsi is a martial art designed to level the playing field between Force users and non-Force sensitives. Also, as a trainee of the Saber Staff, Maul would have most likely had a skill in Naiman. Naiman is considered the style for jack-of-all-trades, and lended itself for the most unorthodox weapons by taking bits and pieces of the first 5 combat forms. Darth Maul utilized Juyo for what I call measured brutality. It was a lot of bark, but he always thought it through before he attempted to bite. Aside from being an assassin, Darth Maul was also a skilled Jedi hunter in his spare time. As a teenager, he had 2 battles with Ciolo Ermanka, a Jedi Master with an unorthodox form and decades worth of training and skill. In the first battle, Darth Maul underestimated his opponent and was driven back by the Old Master's surprising speed. The second time around, he allowed Ermanka to think he had an advantage, then lured him into a false sense of security and struck him down with the second half of his staff. On the other hand, later in life, he was able to dominate Anun Bendara, a Jedi weapons master. The young Zabrak was able to pinpoint that Bendara also had a skill in Teräs Käsi, but Bendara was apparently so outmatched by the young hunter that he genuinely believed the only way to stop him was by way of suicide bombing. Later on against Qui-Gon Jinn and the young Obi-Wan Kenobi, Maul easily outclassed both Jedi so well that he was only brought down by what the Phantom Menace novelization calls bad luck and circumstance. Possibly his greatest feat, however, is that he matched Darth Sidious for at least a moment. Even after being worn down in a gauntlet run on a hostile planet with no resources for over a month, he was still described as being fast enough that Sidious was barely able to deflect his blows. Lord Maul is unhinged. He acted less like a refined warrior and more like a hurricane, destroying everything in his path similarly to Kit Fisto or Mace Windu, except that he cared nothing about the carnage left behind. He and his brother were considered to be either greater than or at least on a relative playing field with Kenobi, Ventress, and General Grievous. Kenobi eventually became accustomed to the way the brothers fight and was able to exploit a weak spot in their guard. But hey, at this point he's considered to be on the level of Mace and Yoda, so that's not exactly a slight against them. Lord Maul even held his own against Mace as well as Aayla Secura for a brief moment, showing that he's more than capable of holding his own against the best of the best in a fight. This is also after he matched Sidious blow for a moment, to a point where Sidious began relying on his Force abilities to win. In his battle with Pre Vizsla, he was honestly barely even trying. Seriously, look at this fight. Lord Maul is letting Vizsla use all the tricks he has in his bag just so that the Mandalorians realize how badly outmatched they are in combat. It wasn't until he got nicked with the saw that he began taking it seriously, and even then it's over quickly. Initially, I gave him problems for losing to Ahsoka during the Siege of Mandalore, but this is also a Maul who's sleep-deprived and tipping further into madness than ever before. Another thing I'd like to mention is that in my analysis of Ahsoka, I found this quote from Henry Gilroy, as part of an extended interview with Dave Filoni and Pablo Hidalgo.
And I think over the years, she's probably had the opportunity to hone her abilities, but there hasn't been as much day-to-day ongoing battling as she was doing in the Clone Wars. So you could say on some level, while she's become more measured, her growth is more spiritual in nature.
This means that the Ahsoka who did this and the Ahsoka who did this are at least close in lightsaber skill, so that is actually a very good feat for him. The creators even admit that he's still a better duelist than her, and it's the circumstances that dictated a loss here. So what are you going to do about it? Old Maul is possibly the most tame in his use of the lightsaber, though that mostly has to do with the caliber of opponents he's fighting. The biggest threats to him here are Vader, who doesn't even bother to show up until after he's gone, and Ahsoka, who he only briefly clashes with. The Inquisitors are absolutely nothing to him, and neither were the Night Sister ghosts or Kanan for the most part. He doesn't really need to care about what he's doing in combat until he finds Kenobi. And at this point, both characters know each other well enough and are skilled enough that the whole thing is basically over as soon as it starts. With true masters of the blade in a Star Wars battle, a fight will either be incredibly long and drawn out, or incredibly short and swift. Old Ben goads him by adopting an identical stance to his old master Qui-Gon Jinn. Maul then attempts the exact same move on Ben that he used to kill Qui-Gon, and pays the price for this lack of foresight. Unfortunately, having no actual competition to do battle with has stagnated Maul's lightsaber skills in this era. In his battle with Kanan Jarrus, the latter has given into the Force completely, and allows it to fuel his actions, similarly to how Kenobi put down General Grievous in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. So between Maul's slight underestimation of his opponent, Kanan's newly found connection to the living Force, and just a hint of plot-induced stupidity, the Zabrak goes down hard. I'm not trying to be negative here. The fact that he was able to foderize the Sith Inquisition, and the fact that he's considered to be a master on Kenobi's level still, is a testament to his abilities on the battlefield staying at least up there. This round is the hardest to call for me, and I don't want to act like any one of them is going to dominate the other two in a fight. Each one has solid high points, and each one has made terrible mistakes. Practically speaking, their absolute lowest points happened because of circumstances outside of their control, and each one of them brings something to the table that the other two are missing. Old Maul is the most experienced of the three, and he might have the easiest time in the early fight because he's the most familiar with what the other two are bringing to the table. Lord Maul's sheer brutality is going to keep him in the fight long term, but it's Darth Maul's intelligence that's going to win the duel for me. Darth Maul simply has the more consistent showings, and he's the most likely to get inside of his opponent's sword guard. I award the younger Darth Maul the edge for his lightsaber skill. I partially made this video to rectify past mistakes in my own analysis, because I am man enough to admit when I'm wrong. I was wrong to undervalue Darth Maul's force abilities. To simply say that he doesn't do that much with them is an underestimation in my part. I was wrong to separate the Siege of Mandalore Maul from the rest of his TCW characterization, because it actually does make sense when given the proper context. I was wrong to put Old Maul so low in my rankings. He is a bit better than I gave him credit for. But the other reason I made this video is because I'm just so fascinated by how one character can gain such drastically different stats and abilities throughout one lifetime. Honestly, I think if you took the young Darth Maul's intelligence and skill with a lightsaber, Clone Wars Maul's raw power in the Force, and Rebels Maul's practiced hand and wide knowledge of the dark side, you'd have a highly dangerous threat. Heck, if Maul were able to keep up his younger self's workout routine into his older years, he could easily outpace the likes of Darth Bane and Car Vaster in a physical bout. Add on the rest of these tools, this guy could have been like Revan Yoda level power. But he lost all that potential because he got cast aside by everybody important. And the true tragedy of his character is that all of this potential was lost by circumstance, random chance, bad luck. As it stands, each one has a piece of that greatness in them, but none of them has it completely. So, which one stands supreme in the end? Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place in one of the hangars on Naboo. All three Zabraks are dropped in cold and have no knowledge of the other two. We are acting as if they are all complete strangers. The advantage to the victor would most likely be a 4 out of 10. Adding the third player in there really changes how things work and means there's less chances for a positive outcome on all three sides. The battle would open with a vicious lightsaber duel. Flashing red lights would be all over the place as each one moves faster than an ordinary eye can perceive. Eventually, Old Maul is outpaced by his younger counterparts and becomes the first to fall. At this point, Darth Maul is picking apart his enemy's style and noticing how similar it is to his own. He starts to become familiar with Lord Maul's attack sequences and begins using the items around him to trip his foe up. This might actually work and get him a quick win, or more than likely, Lord Maul will switch to his force abilities. The Sith apprentice responds in kind, but ultimately falls ever so short. So instead, he weathers the storm, physically tearing through anything his opponent can throw at him, and responding to forced pushes with lesser but still strong shoves of his own. At the end of the day, he closes in on his opponent and finishes him off quickly. In a very close match, I declare Darth Maul the youngest and hungriest of this group, the superior warrior, and the victor of this match.
This is all just my opinion. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. I saw some good suggestions from you guys on how to use Maul in other battles, but to be honest, after working on this video, I'm kind of sick of looking at his stupid face. It's gonna take a while before I can bring myself to use him again. But, thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.